Well, let's head back to Parliament House now in Canberra, and for more on those power problems in South Australia, our political editor Chris Uhlmann is back, and with him is Senator Nick Xenophon. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Kumi. Just recapping what we know so far, and that is that the entire state of South Australia has gone to black. It's gone off the grid. It is connected to the national electricity market through an interconnector with Victoria. From what we understand at the moment, that is down, and 40% of South Australia's power is wind generated, and that has the problem of being intermittent. And what we understand at the moment is that those turbines aren't turning because the wind is blowing too fast. I'm joined now by South Australian Senator Nick Xenophon. Welcome. Nick Xenophon, can you tell us what you know from what you're hearing in South Australia at the moment?
Only limited information so far. I mean, firstly, this is a disgrace. How did this happen? How is an entire state blacked out? What I do know is that the information is that the power will be out at least until 4:15 a.m. tomorrow, South Australian time. So we are looking at something like another 11 hours in darkness. Seeing the map of the grid online, there's something like 29 megawatts of power, presuming it's emergency power somewhere in the state, compared to, which is lower than the lowest previous low of 770 megawatts. This is unprecedented in this nation. We need answers. There needs to be an independent inquiry, independent of government, because this is a disgrace.
So for the rest of our viewers who would find it almost impossible to believe that an entire state could be blacked out, let's walk our way through how this could possibly happen. Now, 40% of South Australia's electricity is wind generated. That's a deliberate policy, but the wind's blowing very hard at the moment, so what's the problem?
Because the generators don't work when the wind is blowing too hard. This is one of the great paradoxes in relation to this. Look, I support renewable energy, I support the renewable energy target, but it's how you achieve it and how you achieve sensible greenhouse gas reduction policies. This has not been sensible, it has been reckless. We have relied too much on wind rather than baseload renewables, rather than baseload power, including gas, which is a fossil fuel, but it is 50% cleaner than coal and a good transitional fuel.
And let's look also at what happened with the 40% of wind-generated power in South Australia. There's a market for electricity, which means that even though it's expensive to build wind turbines, they bid into the market at a much lower price than coal. And the effect of that has been?
It squeezes out the renewable, it squeezes out the baseload generators.
So they've closed down now, the coal-fired power plants.
I mean, I gave a speech on this in Port Pirie a few weeks ago in terms of local industry, and one of the big issues there is that the way the current electricity market rules operate is that if you're a thermal generator, including gas, a good transitional fuel, you actually lose money if you're in the market, because wind will supersede you, wind will take over, and you actually lose money, which means that baseload generators don't want to bid, but this is a problem beyond bidding. This is a problem of the failure of the interconnector, clearly failures of transmission, and the great fear I have, Chris, is that you will have people who need oxygen overnight who won't be able to get their oxygen. I don't know what's happening in our hospitals. I know the Royal Adelaide Hospital was down.
It surely have generators though.
Well, it does, but for some reason the reports I've heard is that the Royal Adelaide Hospital was down. Now, what happens if people are in surgery in the middle of delicate and life-critical surgery? I don't know.
Have you had that confirmed, that the generators at the hospital are not working?
I've been told that the Royal Adelaide Hospital was down. I hope that's wrong, but what is clear is that there will be hundreds, if not thousands, of South Australians who need oxygen in their homes in terms of because of serious medical conditions, who won't be able to access that. So I dread to think what the consequence of that will be.
Now, just again, so for those that don't understand how the system works, as we said, 40% of the power comes from wind. Those turbines aren't turning at the moment because the wind is actually blowing too fast. You do have gas peaking power plants, though. Do we know what's happened there?
We don't know, because it seems that transmission lines may be down as well. Look, there's a big issue here. In Singapore, for instance, they have a lot of redundancy built into their system, so that even if their entire network went out, they would be able to keep the lights on. I'm not suggesting we need that level of redundancy, but we don't even have a basic level of redundancy.
Some of the redundancy is built into the system. South Australia is connected to Victoria by, as you said earlier, an interconnector, in fact 2 interconnectors, and apparently those aren't working at the moment. Do we know why?
We don't know why, but this shows you how vulnerable we are. I mean, South Australia used to be the manufacturing powerhouse of Australia, relying on cheap energy, plentiful energy and reliable energy. Right now, I'm worried sick that there are elderly South Australians with serious medical conditions who won't be able to have their oxygen machines on because the power is out for another 11 hours.
I mean, let's look at this too. This is deliberate government policy. The South Australian government has made quite a lot out of the fact that South Australia has more wind-generated power than any other state. It's made a big deal out of being clean and green, and yet it hasn't taken into account what the consequences are when you put that kind of intermittent energy onto a grid.
Look, that's right. And the frustrating thing here is that back in 2009, when Malcolm Turnbull was opposition leader, we came up with a proposal via Frontier Economics for an energy intensive scheme, which would have meant more gas in the system, still renewables, but you would have had much more reliable power. And in fact, it would have been more greenhouse gas friendly, but it would have been reliable, using gas as a transitional fuel. We've now gone to this other extreme where you don't have redundancy built in, you actually discourage cleaner gas generators, and you're vulnerable at events such as this. This is literally a perfect storm, but we need to know what happened. This is completely unforgivable.
But a storm that has been predicted, because even this week the Grattan Institute brought out a paper which was called The Canary in the Coal Mine, and it warned about the fragility of South Australia's system.
It did, and I didn't expect this to happen now. I predicted at the conference I spoke to a few weeks ago, expect blackouts, expect high energy prices during summer, not now. And the fact that it's happened now is really a crisis that we need the answers to.
And first and foremost, we do need to get some answers. So what do you want to see from this point on?
We need a full independent inquiry. Look, what I'm worried about now is that there are many vulnerable people in my home state who are at real risk of their health. So we need to deal with that. This is an emergency. I'm hoping the power gets on earlier, but if SA Power is saying not for another 11 hours at least, this is unprecedented. There'll be tens of millions of dollars worth of produce, frozen produce, that will be spoiled. It will be a body blow to the state in economic terms. We just need answers, but right now let's get through this crisis.
Again, and one of the long-term issues for this is that the energy system is transitioning. There will be more renewables. It can be done well, but this is an example of what will happen if it's done badly.
This is how not to do it. This is a textbook case of how not to do it, and I cannot fathom. I can't believe that my state is in darkness at the moment. This should not have happened. And if heads have to roll, so be it.
And just finally, the information that you have from South Australian Power at the moment is that this certainly the power will remain out, as far as they know, until perhaps 4 or 5 a.m. tomorrow morning.
That's right. So we're looking at another 11 hours of darkness, and the consequences of that are just horrendous.
And what can people in South Australia do now? I mean, they are thrown back, I'm assuming, on battery power and radios to try and find out what's going on.
That's right, and also I understand mobile phone towers might be out within about 11 or 12 hours because of how they operate as well. So you might find that people won't even have their mobile phones operating in terms of networks.
Well, Nick Xenophon, obviously we'll stay across what we can get out of South Australia. Thank you very much for joining us. And Kumi, we will stay in touch with this as much as we can as we try to work our way through what exactly has happened in South Australia, but there has been a catastrophic failure there of the power grid. We are speculating at the moment, but it would seem that South Australia has produced this circumstance itself in some ways in the power mix that it's been relying on over the last few years. And as Nick Xenophon said, it's not as if this had not been predicted by some as early as Monday this week, and we're reporting on it on Sunday night. The Grattan Institute released a paper which was called The Canary in the Coal Mine and warned of some of the fragility of what was happening in the power grid in South Australia. It may well be that that was a very timely report indeed.